Hello and welcome into a brand new episode of BraveHawk Talk here on the Uncp Sports Network. I'm John Gross. We are so excited to announce the return of this podcast, which will provide you a behind-the-scenes look at all things UNC Pembroke athletics. On today's show, we are joined by UNCP Director of Athletics, Dick Christy, to talk about a whole host of topics, including COVID-19, Cash Bash, and a return-to-play timeline. Later on in today's show, we are joined by Sam Badami, a senior runner on the UNCP cross-country and track and field teams. Dick, thanks for joining us today. I think this is your third time on the podcast, and it's always a pleasure to have you on.
John, always a pleasure to be with such a local celebrity as yourself. Appreciate you having me.
I think the last time that we had you on the podcast was back in the spring, and that feels like 2 years ago at this point. I know a lot has happened since then, and we wanted to get you back on and kind of reset the situation here at UNCP. I know over the summer you had a lot of tough decisions to make. Now here in late October, how do you feel that as a department we currently stand?
Well, it's been exciting to see our teams off the ground and running and competing. We're still in that preseason window as the NCAA and our conferences kind of make final decisions and finishing touches on what the seasons and potential championship opportunities will look like. But the practice competition has been great. I've been really impressed with the work that our athletes did on their own when we were not working with them to stay conditioned and to stay ready. And I think that's shown in what our coaches have been able to do with them in practice. COVID is an ongoing situation, so we're constantly navigating it day by day, trying to monitor symptoms, make sure we quarantine as needed. But it was definitely a challenging summer to try and figure out what's our financial plan to be able to make all this work. But I just can't say enough about our staff and our coaches. They've been totally bought into making sure that our athletes get as good of an experience this year as they possibly can, given the global pandemic environment.
And we'll circle back to COVID in a bit, but I want to start off with some recent news. Last week we had our first ever virtual Cash Bash event, and the grand total was just announced a couple days ago, $71,257 raised at Cash Bash 2020. How do you assess the program as a whole, how it went in the first year virtual, and the amount of money that we raised?
Yeah, so I was probably the last person to admit that we couldn't get Cash Bash in last year. We postponed it and finally decided to go with the virtual format and still get it in. So this is technically what should have been last May's Cash Bash, but we were unbelievably pleased. Our donors responded in an amazing way. I think in 40 minutes we made $40,000 on Tuesday night, which is pretty special. But I just can't say enough about you and our external team, Adam Harden, Andrea Cuthrill, the work that they did to not just plan, but then to grassroots reach out to our donors and kind of explain, this isn't your normal walk up to the silent auction and sign your name. There's going to be some registration and digital work you've got to do with your phone to get ready. And I think when you saw how many users were logged in and active through our stars interviews with you and then through the live auction, I was just really proud of the whole team, and I think it showed in the results. We've still got some folks sending checks saying, I want you to tack it on to the Cash Bash total that we're not able to log in. So I think promotionally the message was clear. Our athletes need this support. We're doing everything we can to keep student scholarships whole, and not only do they need to grow so we can continue to get more competitive, but we've got to do what we can to get as much external support for those scholarships as we can.
And I know we talked about this during the event itself, but for those who may have missed Cash Bash, can you break down where that $71,257 will be going towards?
Yeah, so the lion's share of it goes to the General Scholarship Fund. We have some silent auction items like Coach for a Day and different swag bags and things that our teams donate. And in those instances, that money goes back to their restricted fundraising account to help them do some special things for their athletes. But the live auction, the fund to cause, all of that is to try and give our general fund with the Braves Club as much of a nucleus as we can to support student scholarships.
And how can fans or donors continue to support UNCP athletics even beyond Cash Bash?
We need as many people to be an ongoing, Braves Club member at whatever level they're comfortable. It's very similar to the Nittany Lion Club or the Rams Club or the Wolfpack Club. We need annual donors who are going to get on whether it's a credit card monthly payment plan or just writing a check annually, to understand that that's the type of community, grassroots, widespread membership-based fundraising that leads to longevity and success for athletic programs. And we have a lot of people in this community that are fired up about what our coaches and our athletes are doing, that follow it religiously, that are supportive. We've got to do a good job of getting in front of them and letting them know what some of the options are. Obviously the monthly credit card draw works great for me. I think it's the easiest thing for a donor. You put it on there, it gets charged, and you don't even have to think about it again. And our giving levels, I think, as we get back to a normal cycle, if you're at a certain giving level, you've got hospitality at football and basketball, and you've got access to some of our Adidas swag and contract opportunities and autographed items. So we've got to do a good job of communicating what amenities there are. But in the end, at our level, I think it's people know that it goes to a good cause. They're interested in the philanthropic end, that a lot of our student athletes wouldn't have a chance to get this education if they didn't have the scholarship. And the more we can fund it through private donations, the more students that we can get in the fold.
I want to jump into COVID, and I know things seem to change every single day with protocols and policies and rules. But what has been the overarching COVID policy here in the athletic department at UNCP?
I think our tenet has been just trying to over-communicate. Early on, as things were changing daily, we did a lot of all-staff WebEx meetings and really tried to we're essentially communicating uncertainty, but at least to give our coaches some comfort to know, look, this is what's been said from the NCAA, this is what's been said from our conference, this is where we think this is going to go. But a lot of the decisions people were continuing to delay to make sure they were making it with the most recent health data, the most recent statistics, to try and make best decisions possible. We're kind of still in that mode. So our focus has been on protecting our community, through the screenings, through the testing, through the mask wearing, through the sanitization, making sure that we can stay in lockstep on the things that we can control. And then as the NCAA and our conferences make decisions, that'll help us to really fine-tune, what does our testing plan look like for the spring when we're competing, and what do we need to do before we travel to a road game, and, what does that look like? Is it different when we're staying in an overnight trip versus just going the day of? All those little nuances and finished schedules are still being drafted with our conferences. And the next thing for you and our external team when we do have those schedules is to kind of overlay those and see where our challenges are. Trying to operate 14 sports in a 3.5 month window is not going to be easy. I'm excited for it. I think it'll be a neat energy, but there's going to be days that we might have 7 home events, and how do we broadcast that? How do we navigate that? How do we cover that? How do we make sure that we're keeping visiting locker rooms safe and separate and clean? So there'll be a lot of things that we'll be planning feverishly right into Christmas, mainly from the fact that, the NCAA and our conferences still, they don't necessarily know exactly what they're going to do.
And are there team-specific protocols in place? Because, you look at a sport like cross-country versus football, there's a very different level of contact between those two sports.
Yeah, so the NCAA broke all sports into high, medium, and low risk. And depending on what your sport falls into, changes what their testing parameters would be as we get into competition. So for a low-risk sport like swimming, they have a certain testing standard and screening standard, whereas a high-risk sport like basketball, they would have a different testing standard. And where the NCAA has gone even further, so their healthcare arm is called the Sports Science Institute, and that group has been giving medical advisory guidance to say, as of right now, with what we know from the CDC and public health, this is what we recommend to be able to safely compete in athletics. And that has been a changing environment over the last couple of months, both up and down. There's some things that have gotten more stringent, some things that they've backed off on. So trying to stay with your finger on the pulse of that and being able to communicate that to our coaches and to our athletes, and make sure that we're following the latest guidance. But they've even gone further here in the last week to differentiate between outdoor high-risk sports and indoor high-risk sports. So, the basketballs, the volleyball, the wrestling, those are really in the crosshairs at the highest level of specificity for testing and screening. So we're finalizing all those plans. Fortunately for us, we still have a few months until there's projected competition for some of those teams that are high risk. But we really want to get started and make sure we're doing it in a safe way.
And it's an interesting situation too, because UNCP athletic teams are a part of two different conferences. Do you anticipate any sort of major differences in rules between the two conferences?
I think that's entirely possible. Yeah, right now everything from the NCAA Sports Science Institute is technically a guideline. It's not a requirement. Conferences can take the step to mandate that, which in a lot of ways the Peach Belt has already taken that step. You mentioned that we've got 4 sports competing in the Mountain East Conference, so we've been keeping up to date with what their protocols and policies are. We've also been engaged in conversations with Conference Carolinas, which will be our home next year. So it's been really helpful to be engaged on those conversations with Conference Carolinas, kind of see how they're managing it since they're in our region. But it has been a lot of different conversations to keep straight. Christina Chow, our SWA, she kind of helps me to keep notes and make sure that I'm not mixing up what one conference says from the next. But all 3 have pretty much had weekly calls with athletic administrators, Peach Belt, Mountain East, and Conference Carolinas. So it's given us a good snapshot of how other schools are handling it, how other leagues are looking to handle it, and where do we need to land between what's required and what's just a guideline.
And you did kind of touch on this earlier, but the big question among Brave Nation fans, when will majority of the sports return? Do you have any idea on potential timeline?
Yeah, so we're already competing in cross country. We've got the Peach Belt Championship coming up. I believe it's November 14th for them. So both teams, I'm really excited to see. I think they've got a great nucleus to improve on their finish from last year. Obviously I think the men are probably neck and neck with a chance to maybe even win the title. Our swimming program is off and running. They've got a competition coming up in about 2.5 weeks. Fortunately, swimming is a low-risk, quote, low-risk sport. So the screening and the testing process for them is different than what it might look like for wrestling or basketball. And those are the ones that are most closely on the horizon. We're trying to work with the Peach Belt to see, what does the basketball schedule look like, and based on how many games we try and get in, how early will it start? It could start, I think, as early as late November and as late as mid-January, depending on the comfort level of the schools and the ability to test and to handle all the protocols. Wrestling is a really nuanced situation. So being in the Mountain East Conference, we'll play in that championship, but there's not a regular season schedule for the Mountain East. So ensuring that we get enough wrestling competition to meet the minimums is going to be crucial, because we've got a team that is capable of defending their region championship and their conference championship. So we've got to make sure they've got enough competition here relatively locally to meet those minimums and be able to go to both championship events. So wrestling, I could see probably getting off the ground in December, and then trying to meet those minimums by early February, if at all possible. The fall sports that were rescheduled are kind of an interesting overlap of the existing winter and spring sports. So I think that you'll see soccer get started very early. Soccer would be going in January. I think football and volleyball would probably be staggered much later, probably getting started somewhere in a March window and wrapping up in mid-April. But it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be fast and furious. But I think all of our student athletes, particularly those who came back this year to try and get another chance at a championship, I think that the energy is going to be infectious with or without fans, and it's going to be fun to finally get them back on the field.
Dick, phenomenal insight as always. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your leadership through this crazy situation.
John, thanks for keeping our fans and Brave Nation in tune with everything going on, and great job on the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks again to Dick for joining us on today's show. Next up, Sam Badami of the UNCP cross country and track and field teams. As Dick and I spoke about in our first segment, the cross country program is currently the only UNCP team in action. So, what's it like to be competing in the age of COVID-19? Let's find out. Sam, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today in BraveHawk Talk. Really excited to speak with you today. You are one of the lucky ones in terms of student athletes. A lot of sports still waiting to get their season started, but the cross-country season is underway. What's that been like to finally get back to competition?
It's been good. It was kind of like, it was hard because we had our opener right before we left. For outdoor track, we had our opener right before we left for spring break. And I know a lot of us felt like we were in really good shape and we were happy with how the opener went. We went home for spring break and we never came back. I kept training through the summer with my friend whose season also got cut short. She goes to a school in Florida. But it was hard. You kind of felt like you were in a standstill, so it's nice to be back at it.
And yeah, you talked a bit about the preparation over the summer. How were you able to stay engaged and stay active through the midst of a pandemic?
I mean, there wasn't a lot to do. Usually I would work during the summer, but obviously that didn't work with COVID and everything and what my job was. And I guess me and my friend Katie, the girl who I was talking about, we ran in high school together, and she actually runs for the University of Central Florida, which I'm from Orlando. And so we both kind of kept each other motivated, and we did workouts together and did recovery runs and long runs together. So we were pretty much pushing each other to keep going through the whole summer.
Now, you mentioned you're from Orlando.
Yes.
How'd you end up at Uncp?
So I was just, my boyfriend actually used to run here, and Coach O used to live in Florida. Long story short, my current boyfriend was just my friend in high school. We went to the same high school together. He was a senior. I was a freshman. Coach O recruited him. And when it was my senior year, Coach O asked this person, is there anybody who I should be recruiting? And he gave my name and Katie's name. Katie ended up staying local. She went to UCF. And I came here mainly due to the nursing program. And I really liked the team.
Nice. Well, we're definitely going to circle back to your nursing major in a little bit, but focusing more too on this season, I know things are probably crazy even during the season.
Yes.
As a senior on this team, do you feel a responsibility to try to keep everyone focused and locked in with everything going on in the background?
I mean, yeah, I tend to try to, we have a big group chat, but I'm not the only, I came in with a lot of girls. I mean, there's 5 of us girls on the team who all came in together. So it's actually pretty nice because we all kind of share responsibility of keeping people like up to date and posted on the going-ons and like who's doing what when, and all of that stuff. But it's really hard to juggle it all, especially now because so many things have changed.
I could absolutely imagine. And as a runner, you participate in really all 3 seasons, cross-country and then indoor and then outdoor in the spring. For those listeners who maybe aren't familiar with the differences between cross-country, indoor, and outdoor, can you give them an idea of the differences in terms of preparation and then the actual execution of the competitions?
Yeah, this is funny because I actually had to explain this to my nursing professor because they were like, when are you running? And I'm like, all the time. So fall is cross-country, and that's the typical, we're running outdoors on trails for at least 3 miles. Our races are always at least a 5K. Typically, we'll do 5Ks through the season, then championship season will come around, we'll start doing 6Ks. Okay, that's the fall. The season usually ends in November at some time, and then we get maybe a week off, and we immediately start training for indoor track. Indoor tracks obviously they're indoors, almost in like warehouse areas, and all indoor tracks are usually 200 to 350 meters. If you know your typical track, that's 400 meters. This track is a little bit shorter, and they have different race events. So an outdoor will have a 1,500, but an indoor will have a mile, which is a 1,600. So that's winter. So that usually ends around January or February. And then we're in outdoor track, which is the big track that everybody knows in the stadium. We run outside, and that usually starts in March.
Okay. Do you have a favorite between the 3?
It depends on the day. You really the answer will change. It depends on the day. Track is what my mainstay was in high school. I didn't start running cross country until my junior year of high school.
Okay.
So I am more familiar with track.
Do you find it easier to run on a track? You're not. I know cross country typically isn't necessarily up and down hills per se, but it's more running in nature.
Yeah, they all hurt just in different ways.
Okay.
It's the easiest way to explain it.
No, that's a good way to put it. What would you say are some of the biggest differences? Because we're going to talk a bit about the championship last winter, but from the day that you walked onto campus here at UNCP to today, what are some of the changes in the program that you've noticed?
We definitely have more international students than when I first came in. Originally, it was just Silas. I know he's kind of a mainstay. Everybody knows Silas. The team has definitely gotten a lot closer, I feel like, as the years have gone by, and we're more comfortable with, like, the way things are going. Not just, like, with each other, but, like, coaches as well. And I think it just has to do with how long everyone's been here now and how familiar we are, because it's pretty much a core group that's been here for a while.
You mentioned running with some international teammates. I know there's a very impressive Kenyan contingent on the team. What's it like to run with people from other countries and learn about their backgrounds?
I mean, it's awesome. I love learning about new cultures, and Armand and Valerie both are super sweet. They're hilarious. They also want to get into nursing, so we have kind of that familiarity with each other because we all three want to do the same thing. So I mean, it's just a regular person who's from somewhere else. It's just a teammate.
So let's go back to last winter. It was first season in the Mountain East Conference, and you come away with the indoor track and field conference championship. I believe it was the first conference championship in UNCP women's track and field history. What was that experience like to come away with the title?
It meant a lot. I know, and I'm not just saying me, but a lot of us we had to qualify to be able to go. It wasn't just like coach picked the people he wanted to go. Like, you were competing against everybody in the conference, and you would check the online postings to make sure you were in that top 15 so you could go to conference. So it was, I mean, there were weekends where it's like I didn't want to look at the postings because I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. And maybe I got kicked out for that week, and then I would have to try again next week, me and a lot of other girls. So when we finally got there and everything worked and paid off, obviously it was a really big relief, and it was fun to celebrate.
Absolutely. And the celebration continued until, I mean, obviously through now, I'm sure you'll still be celebrating this for life, but you got a ring very recently.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Do you, what's your strategy for wearing? Will you wear that around, or are you just going to keep that in the case as a souvenir?
That's staying in the case. I don't have a very, flashy personality. I like that it's big, but I like that it's big on my shelf, not on my finger.
I understand, and that's certainly a valuable piece, and I feel like that's a lot of pressure to wear a big ring like that around. You've talked about it a couple times. You are a nursing major. You want to become a nurse. Why nursing?
I like to help people. That's the simplest way to put it.
And you are in your senior year now. What are some of the things that have really stood out amongst your nursing classes that you feel that prepare you in a major way for your career?
Okay. Well, time management is definitely something I have learned and had to stick to because, I mean, being an athlete alone is hard. Being a student athlete is hard. Being a student athlete who's in the nursing program, and there have been soccer players and volleyball players on UNCP who have done it. It's not easy. It's really hard, but it's possible.
Can you give us an idea of what it's like to balance that? How you're able to structure your schedule so that you can excel in both those different things, both as a student and an athlete?
Okay. Everyone's going to be like, oh, no, this girl has no life. But I can give you a typical day.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so sometimes, let's take a Monday. My Mondays never change, so we always have workouts on Mondays. So I'm out there by 5:15, so usually I'll wake up at around 4:45. I'll get ready. I'll be at the track at between 5 and 5:15. I'll start my warm-up. I'm ready to go and do my workout by 6 o'clock. Okay, my workout's over. Let's say I get home at 7:30 or 8. I shower. I have I usually have to get home by 7:30. I shower. I have class from 8 to 11. I do some homework. I go lift weights. I go to the training room. I come back. I shower. I do more homework. I cook dinner. I do homework. And then I have 30 minutes to sit for myself. And then I do it all over again the next morning.
That is incredible. And you get it all done. You excel in really all aspects. So that is really, really impressive. Do you have like plans or aspirations for your next steps beyond UNCP?
I mean, I definitely want to work. I would like to become a DNP. So that's my ultimate goal, but that's going to take a few years, like more than a few years. It's going to take like a decade. You need work experience for that. But I mean, I'll definitely keep running in life, but after college, I would like to stay fit with running, but my whole plan is to jump 2 feet into the nursing world. Nice. And see where that takes me.
And that actually leads me into our fun question. We always like to end these interviews with a bit of a fun question, and you said that you want to continue running even post UNCP, which is great. If you could run anywhere on Earth, where would it be? And you can try to be as specific as possible with this, and it could be a place that you've been or haven't been.
Okay, so, well, my dad is from Italy, specifically Sicily, and I would like to run there. It's beautiful.
Great. Is that something that one day you are going to try to do?
Yeah. I mean, my whole family is we've been trying to go to Italy for like years, but Italy is expensive for people who don't know that. So I would love to run around Italy. I would love to.
Awesome. Well, Sam, best of luck with everything. Keep up the great work, both as a runner and in the classroom, and I look forward to seeing your success moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Sam for joining us on today's show. That'll do it for our first episode of BraveHawk Talk in this fall semester. Make sure to stay tuned to our social media platforms for future episodes. And if you're not already doing so, follow us on all of our social media platforms, on Twitter at UNCP_sports, on Instagram also at UNCP_sports, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube page. Talk to you again soon.